Okay, so today there's a few things that we want to do. We're going to continue. We're going to continue with our regular lecture, of course. There's a few other things I want to get done today. Now let's go through them. So this is week 5. So we're definitely coming into the very important part of the semester. And what we're going to do today is we'll take a look at your assessments that are upcoming, or what assessments we're working on. Then what we're going to do is, uh, enviro legislation, story time, enviro legal story. So we'll watch a clip on that. And then we will look at a few of the slides. Oops, that should be 3. So we'll go through the lecture slides. And lastly, at the end of the class, let's look at our term assignment, term project. And then what we'll do is your assignment this week is to make groups. So we want you to make groups. And then next week, the assignment might be to pick a case, okay? So that's where we're going to start out today. Before we do, any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. When is the first exam due date? Okay, great. That is a great question. So we'll just look at the assessments. And that will answer your question, Peter. Good afternoon, Aiden. I'm assuming it's Aiden and not Aidan. Okay, so there's no other questions. So let us take a look at the assessments for this week and the upcoming weeks. And that should give you guys a good idea about your term test. So bring that up as well. Okay, so let me share this with you. Lost it. It should be up. Can you see? Can you see the list of assessments? So if you look at what I post every week, I update this. So what does it mean when it's red versus what does it mean when it's blue? Well, let me show you what that means. Don't know if I went through this with you guys. So what this means is if it's red, it's done. Why did I pick red? Because it's the past. Like these guys. It looks like they'll never win again in my life. Then we have the teams of the future who are going to win, inshallah, God willing. The Toronto Blue Jays. It is today. They are going to be champions today. I used to say the Leafs, but no. Or depending on who you are, in terms of your sporting preferences, here's another one of our champions who I love to follow. Except when they're beating Pakistan, I love watching India. So there you go. You got blue. All right. That is the team of today. But the Montreal Canadiens, Pakistan cricket. Could have put green as well because that was a long time ago, and I don't think they're ever going to win again. So that's why our teams of the past, that's Montreal. Our team of today, the Jays. So that's why it's blue. Does that make sense to everybody? Or am I just an old man ranting about the past? Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Okay, now going back. Well, Aiden, at least they're division champions. So, is everybody clear? Once it's red, what does that mean? It's done. When it's blue, what does that mean? It's your next thing. And that's what you're going to work on this week. Okay, you should have received your marks up to week 2. I'm trying not to be strict, but a couple of people have said things that have made me puzzled. Unless I see otherwise, always assume you should include citations and references, okay? We're in an academic institution. So let me not have that issue ever again, please. Next, there's a question about the test. It's online, test number 1, week 8, the 27th of October. That is when the test is. Okay? And the research project, which I'm going to start you guys working on, I will hand out today. Stefan, are you still lost? Or is it clear about the assessments? Okay, so basically blue, like the Jays or the Indian cricket team or the Toronto Maple Leafs, means it's the next assessment. If it's green or red, like Pakistan or the Montreal Canadiens, it means it's done. They're the past. Okay? All right, let's continue. So that covered that part. Now let's talk about the story. Okay, so when we look at people in the past, they were not able to assess their own water. We didn't have the systems in place to assess the water quality. And tragedies have occurred in the past. So we're going to start watching the start. We're not going to watch the whole video, but we're going to start watching the start about what happened to some American soldiers at a camp where they did not have good water quality. So that's the legislative story now. Oops, I gotta start the share with. Share the sound, optimize the video, and let me know if you can't hear.
Every person in the USA has probably seen the commercials by law firms willing to represent victims of the water contamination at Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Many Marines, civilians, and their families were poisoned by the contaminated groundwater. Many people saw the film Erin Brockovich, where Julia Roberts gathered samples of water from an industrial site in defense of people living nearby who suffered and died from various cancers, and won a huge settlement against Pacific Gas and Electric in California on July 2, 1996 for $333 million, around $650 million today. But the real crime supporting the huge payout was the cover-up by PG&E. But the Camp Lejeune case is much larger, involving the federal government. The Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration denied claims for decades, very similar to their resistance to including Agent Orange health-related issues to Vietnam veterans until forced to accept those cases. But why? Let's find out. What caused the contamination? Why was there a cover-up? Who was involved? Why has this problem never been fully resolved? How many people were affected? And how? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. It is believed that almost 200,000 Marines, sailors, and probably an equal number of their dependents and civilian workers were poisoned over 5 decades. Investigations kept stating several causes, from farmer runoff from fertilizers and much later from some illegal dumping of dangerous chemicals. But the federal government claimed that it was a North Carolina state issue, not the government, which was problematic because then, under North Carolina's statute of repose, no civil tort lawsuit can be filed after more than 10 years. This law effectively blocked Camp Lejeune victims from bringing lawsuits seeking financial compensation. In 2012, the Janie Insminger Act was passed, authorizing the U.S. government to pay medical care costs to family members harmed by the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. But the Insminger Act had limitations. It was basically a disability benefits case. Worse, Marines' families were excluded. In 2016, multi-district litigation involving 850 former Camp Lejeune residents, Straw v. the United States, was dismissed based on the North Carolina repose statute. Many members of Congress, especially those who were veterans, believed that Marines and their families should not be limited to just VA benefits, which are hard enough to obtain, which led to the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022. But it is still an uphill battle, even when the evidence was presented. One source for much of this information comes from one of our loyal viewers with first-person experience, and I quote, paraphrasing, "The base public relations then went on to say, after water testing in 1982, they found 4 or possibly 5 dangerous chemicals in the drinking water. Everything the base PR said is not true. It would appear that the contamination was not an accident, but a terrible crime that made thousands of Marines and their wives and children sick, many with serious diseases that lasted a lifetime, and many died, never knowing it was the water. The in-depth testing determined that 9 dangerous chemicals, not 4 or 5, were in the water. All are known carcinogens, and this was known by the base authorities in March 1965. The secret was kept until 1982 when they were forced to test the water. Camp Lejeune water supplies are very interconnected. 4 months after arriving at Camp Lejeune and working near the water as well as consuming it, I started having unusual medical problems, losing weight, nosebleeds, coughing up blood, fevers, thrombosis in the testicles, pains in the kidneys, groin, and more. I worked right at the water's edge helping with various weapons classes. There were occasional complaints about the smell, but I thought it had to do with the water shifting like the smell of a low tide. One evening in January of 1965, after class, I noticed a truck backing up to the water on a dirt trail nearby. The back of the truck opened and 2 men started emptying barrels of a colored fluid directly into the reservoir. When they left, I noticed a grease-like film over the top of the water in that area and spreading outward. I became concerned and told 2 friends about it, but was told, "Don't complain, just stay out of it." I started keeping notes of the truck's arrival and dumping. During that time, I noticed a different truck that was smaller but also dumping barrels of fluid into the water. I went to pick up my laundry, which was delivered to the base a few times a week, and recognized the truck. I started questioning the truck driver under the pretense that I was doing some research on chemicals for a course I was taking. He gave me the name of the chemicals, which I recorded in my notes. After a few weeks, I asked him about the dumping of the barrels into the reservoir, and his attitude changed. I directly asked him if he thought it was illegal. He responded that they had approval from the base authority. Much later, I found out who the authority was. As a matter of fact, he said the local chrome plating company where he drove occasionally did the same thing. So I borrowed a camera from a friend and started taking pictures of the dumping and keeping a record of how many barrels were being dumped from the large truck, which was the laundry truck, and the smaller truck, which turned out to be...
Let's watch the next part. And the more recent update. So this became a big deal for them later on. So give you a bit of it's more like an update.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We need to finish this project. Alhamdulillah, I'm here at massive.
This is more of the update. Yeah, I gave you a bit of the background. Here's more of the update.
Claims of toxic Massive claims of toxic water on a U.S. military base, with many fearing it's leading to a wide range of cancers. It's an issue News Nation has covered multiple times in the past. Camp Lejeune at the center of a landmark study on contaminated water. Since then, officials estimate as many as 1 million veterans, workers, or relatives who lived or worked at the base have been exposed. And in 2022, President Biden signed into law the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. It promises to address the issue. Anyone who lived on the base for 30 days or more from 1953 to 1987 and contracted diseases such as cancer or Parkinson's was able to file a claim. So let's bring in News Nation's Evan Lambert, who is live with the details. So, Evan, the claim deadline has now passed, but how much does Congress project the payout will be?
The U.S. government, Nicole, expects to pay out $21 billion or more related to these claims at Camp Lejeune, stemming from the toxic water there. That is an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office, and we are just now learning the scope of veterans and their families who have filed these claims with the Department of the Navy. It is more than 500,000. Those court documents recently revealed are revealing the details of the exact number of those claims. They say, in part, quote, there are approximately 546,500 administrative claims on file with the Department of the Navy. And you'll remember the military admitted that the water at Camp Lejeune down in North Carolina was toxic from at least 1953 to 1987. Earlier this year, we spoke to a man who says that his 9-year-old daughter got leukemia. He believes that that's attributable to the toxic water there at the Marine Corps base. She later died. Listen.
We knew there was a fuel problem, contamination problem on the base that they tried to hide, and they hid it for a long time. And it's starting to reveal itself now. They can't argue with these numbers.
Nicole, as you noted, more than 1 million people may have been affected and have diseases related to that toxic water, potentially cancers and things like Parkinson's, as you mentioned as well. Nicole.
All right, Evan Lambert live for us there in Washington.
Okay, so that's I thought that was interesting. Also, I think it's going to tie in well to some of our discussions today. Okay, let's go through the lecture slides and hopefully give you some good information today. So these first few, I'm not going to worry about. Okay, so we went into the Environmental Protection Act. So let's continue with that. We'll look at some of what it covers in more detail and what are other legislations to come out of it. So the first one is the Ontario Water Resources Act of 1990. So this is for when a facility wants to discharge sewage or wastewater to a local natural water body. It needs to be approved by the Minister of the Environment, and it requires an ECA under OWRA. And this discharges, so this legislation prohibits any discharge of any liquid that would change the quality of the water. And so what does that mean? Right? We just saw a situation where they were dumping waste at that base. So that would be one example. What are other examples? So if you're dumping chemicals into a water body, also effluent or wastewater. Now you can get permission, but you're not allowed to just dump effluent. You have to treat it first. Also, interestingly, this is something that's not on the radar as high as yet, but any water that goes through low impact development, so that's storm water that's treated on site. So they're starting to look into this as well, especially given the salt related impacts. You could now I have a question for you guys. So I want you guys to think about this. And I'm gonna put you into groups because I need you to start thinking like environmental professionals. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a and it's gonna be interesting because I'd like to see where you guys are are at. Okay, so I'm gonna create three breakout rooms. And you're gonna go in there and you're gonna answer the question. Under the Ontario Water Resources Act or related existing municipal bylaws. It's the end of the summer. Are we okay under the environmental regulations with simply emptying our swimming pool, if somebody has a swimming pool, into the stormwater drain? Are we okay with that under this legislation? Seems very innocent. Why? Because it's not harmful. We swim in that water. So the question is, I'm going to type the question in the chats to help you. And I'm going to assign it. So basically, I'm going to create four. How many people do we have? We have 18 people. So we will create 5 rooms. That's the first question. And I'd like to see what all of you think. Okay, so go into your rooms once I've assigned them and discuss it. Okay, and then we'll see what the right answer is, and then we'll go through why that's the right answer. So go to your room and have that discussion. So we'll get back. I'll call you guys back at around 12:01. So I'll call you guys back at about 12:01.
I I have came back from the room. I
Okay,
don't
everything okay? Is everything okay?
know. I just put me in some room.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. If you've come out of the room, that's okay. Kazim, Gabi, you guys came out of your room?
Oh, we're done, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. You guys can come out. That's okay.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you.
I said 12. I meant 201, not 12. Broadcast to the group. So 1 more minute, and then I'll start shutting the groups. I had initially said 1201, I meant 201. Sorry about that. Okay, guys, welcome back. So we'll start this discussion with group number 5. I think it was room number 5. Can somebody from room number 5 tell me, can you just empty out the water in your swimming pool?
Um, we said that if like the people dumping pool water into stormwater drains could be an issue, but it might more so be better to just improve the treatment that water and storm water drains have to like prevent bigger issues. Like if floods happen and it gets like you get all the water in there, having pool water in there might not be that much of an issue. And it
Yeah,
might
so
Stormwater drains you should have more treatment, you said? More treatment, so that's not an issue. But you would agree currently it's an issue, or let's go to room
and
number 3. Or hold on, somebody was trying to speak up. Go ahead.
oh yeah. So we kind of came to the conclusion that pool water is
Pool water is?
Probably basic human waste, like it's like sweat, urine, whatever, and
Okay.
chlorine. So there's worse things going in there.
Sweat,
So
urine, chlorine. Okay. Worse things.
yeah, there's worse things than pool water,
I
was what
agree.
I meant. Yeah.
Not the worst thing. This is not the worst thing. I
Yeah.
agree with you. However, interesting that you bring that up. So this is key, guys. This is key right here, right?
Mhm.
How about group number 1? What do you guys think?
So we have some like there are certain types of pools that uh, there are certain types of pools that I believe are allowed to drain the water, and certain that aren't. Um, for salt pools, um, I've seen that they can drain out the water into the drain. There's also very small pools, like within houses, that sometimes, from time to time, if it rains too much and the pool might overflow, that they do pump out the water, even if it has chlorine in it. But that's only to maintain a balanced. For public pools, I've never once seen a public pool like drain out their water into the drain. I think that there's like a truck that perhaps comes and picks it up and disposes of it because it has a larger quantity of water. There's more. It's public. More people use it. There could be more contaminants, and it has a greater amount of chlorine. And that's what we came to the conclusion that there's a difference between small and large pool and chlorine versus salt pool.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So, that was marvelous, by the way, what he just said. Yes, city or municipal run pools, you'll never see them drained like that. I agree with you completely. It's usually private pools. And yes, in the case of a flood emergency, they probably wouldn't say anything, but there are legislation in place, city bylaws in place. Does anybody else have anything to add before I clarify this? Because I thought this was a good exercise to get you guys thinking. Because remember, what is now September 2025? From my point of view, at this time in a few years, you should be competent environmental professionals. And one of the requirements for that is you understand some basic applications of environmental law. So, uh, how about we just go through what the official status is in our city? Well, your city, I live in Whitby. So here's how what the city bylaws or legislation has in place, that there are dangers from the chlorine and saltwater pools, right? You are able to discharge, but it has to be dechlorinated first. And it cannot be done on rainy days. Now, it's better if you just allow it to be discharged into, like, for example, your lawn or in a grassy area so that it infiltrates into the subsurface. But it's not always you're not, if you don't have that option, and if you don't have the option of pumping it into a nearby storm sewer after being dechlorinated, you can ask for a company to come and pump it out, who has an ECA. Okay, and why is that? It's because of the different types of um, chemicals that can be found, which are going to be different from the chemicals or the chemistry of surface water body. And yes, we should have better treatment for stormwaters, but by definition, a stormwater drain means that it goes to the lake, a river, a a creek, untreated. So by definition, now in the city of Toronto, that's not always the case. Why? Because we do have combined sewage. You have combined sewage systems. But by definition, stormwater drains do pump it out to natural water bodies. So that covers that. But there's a couple of other things I want to mention to you guys. Even if you were to treat, so in theory, let's say we've covered off both things, right? In theory, we should be able to pump it into the water body, but that's really still not true. Because what are the other reasons why you're going to cause impairment? Temperature. The temperature of that water. The pH of that water. How about the BOD and COD? Do you guys know what that is? Biological oxidant demand and chemical oxidant demand. What about the ecological makeup? So a natural surface water body has microorganisms in it. Now you've introduced a bunch of water that by default we assume has a limited amount, if any. So that's why this seems like a very simple thing. But it's actually not that simple. And so I'm glad you guys participated in that exercise there. So let's go back to, I don't know why my camera is such that it cuts off half my face. Since chemicals used in the food, exactly. So what those chemicals would do, so Aiden makes an excellent point. So by default, what those chemicals will do is they'll kill microorganisms in natural water bodies, and we don't want that. Right? Remember, the highest sphere that we want to protect is the biosphere. Except in cases where, we have to kill something we don't want to. Right? Exactly. Yeah. That is true, Aiden. So coming back to our slides. Now you can usually the cities don't go after people for that. They'll just give you a warning. But yeah, you're not supposed to take any liquid that's been processed in your facility and just dump it into a water body. You have to first treat it, and you have to get an ECA to treat it and pump it into surface water. The next one is the Great Lakes Protection Act of 2015, and the purpose is to protect the ecological health for the Great Lakes Basin. And it basically establishes targets and rules and how to protect surface water bodies that are part of the Great Lakes system. Now, when you think of life on Earth, what do you guys think? When you think of life on Earth, you think that most people live like we do? Do you think that most people live like we do? Now, what is it that makes it different from us? Well, imagine. So imagine that you create a new religion. Imagine that you create a new religion and you're in ancient Israel or Saudi Arabia. And this is what life looks like for you, right? You want people to be good. And what do you promise them? You promise them heaven with flowing water. So a few years ago, Leslie Hazelton went in through one of the scriptures in one of her TED Talks, and she talked about, oh, well, this is what they say heaven looks like. And she pointed out that where she lives here in North America, with all the water that's plentiful and waterfalls and all the greenery, we already live in what looks like heaven. Yet do we treat it like we live in a heavenly environment? Do we respect that, right? And that's where the Great Lakes, that is where the Great Lakes protection comes in, right? We have one of the best localities on Earth created by how? How was it created? Do you guys all know how the Great Lakes were created? Understand how the Great Lakes were created? Maybe we'll play a game here. Since you guys are environmental students, you need to know these things, right? I don't want you guys to not know these things, right? Okay. So one answer is glaciers. The erosion and placement of glaciers. That's number one. Option number two, lots of rainfall. Is that what created the Great Lakes? Tectonic. So plate tectonics. Plate tectonics. Or was it divine? Was it divine? Okay, so at the end of the Ice Age, that would be the glaciers. Yeah. So how many people think it's number one? With a show of hands, how many people it's number one? I don't see any hands, I guess. It's not working for you guys. Or how many of you think it's excessive rainfall? What about plate tectonics? That shifting of the plates exposed an aquifer. That is an interesting one. I really, really appreciate that one. I think all of them played a part. Yes. Assuming you think there's a creator, I would agree with you. First off, that was kind of a joke. We are in a scientific class. I enjoy teasing. You could argue that all of them played a part. You could. I think what actually happened is that yes, it was initially glaciers, but rainfall does play a part. Plate tectonics, not so much, not so much. Although there's an interesting thing where the ice age, the glaciers sort of pressed down on it. Okay, so it's a question, how do you raise your hand? Go to the bottom. There used to be reaction. So if you go to the bottom, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unpin myself. So this will help you guys as well. Unpin. So if you go to the bottom and you see reactions, and you'll see raise hand. So you see my hand is raised. See, that's what that was about. So, and then you can lower your hand just for future. All right. That'll help you guys if you're in that situation again. Okay. So not so much, but there's a great story that I got to tell you guys someday about an ancient Hindu king and a Muslim fisher. Well, she's not a fisherman, so she's a fisher woman. Or as Justin Trudeau would say, fisher people. As we believe in people, there's no mankind according to Justin Trudeau. But he's no longer in charge, so he can't put me in jail. Plus, he's not Donald Trump. He would put me in jail for sure, because I erased God from here. So it was glaciers. Quick question to you guys. Quick question to you guys. What was the glaciers? Why did we have glaciers? Why did we have glaciers? Yeah, Aiden, you're right. The Ice Age, 100%. What caused the Ice Age? What caused the Ice Age? Temperature drops, yes. What caused? Yes, it was that dang squirrel. So let's say this is the sun. To answer that question, you have to understand that at one point, so that's Mercury, Venus, Mars, Earth, unless you're a flat earther, then this is the Earth, right? But I'm not a flat earther. The Earth, the asteroids, you know, that's where Han Solo hid. During the Empire Strikes Back. It's an important place, the asteroid belt. And then you've got Jupiter, Saturn, so on. Neptune. Is it Neptune or Uranus first? I think it might be Uranus and then Neptune. And then Pluto, but that Pluto's not a planet anymore. Oh shoot, I've got these backwards. Sorry about that. Good call. Did I get Uranus and Neptune right? Yeah, so Earth has to be here, right? So we're gonna respect the flat earthers. Okay, not really relevant. I'm not really important, but Pluto is no longer a planet. But a lot of the planets lined up together. Yes, yes, Stefan, my memory fails me. So what that did is the gas giants, it knocked our orbit out slightly. Yes, sir. After Pluto is our hopes and dreams, interstellar space. Actually, it's not. It's you have to go past the Oort cloud. So this was knocked slightly off its orbit. Well, Ryan, to be fair, if you grew up with 9 planets, that's what it was, right? I agree, Aiden, because then if we include Pluto, we have to include other planets. Anyways, so this knocked it off its orbit slightly. And that's why we had the Ice Age. According to a certain number of people. All right. And then when the Great Lakes melted, it filled up that part of Ontario, Michigan, New York. Of course, it wasn't really called that back then. Okay. All right. So imagine that what we have is probably one of the most amazing ecosystems because of the end of the glaciers, the Ice Age. And what if you think the United States is not going to invade Canada, think about the water resources, right? And so that's why we've tried to have a good working relationship with that country in order to create a situation where they get to use the water that they need, and we get to use the water that we need while we protect the resources. Another very interesting I don't know if I call it legislation, but it's also an important part of our global history, right? And I just thought I'd share that with you guys because I've actually worked under that as well. It's not relevant to this part of the world. So it's the Indus Water Treaty, and it's for the water distribution between India and Pakistan. Because although India is at the headwaters, they do allow for the water to flow so that Pakistan also gets water. And this way, both countries with large populations are able to give water. Now, in that case, why do we have such an interesting water system that also is for China as well? It's because another geological event where the Indian plate is hitting the Asian plate, and you've got uplifting of the mountains that are now the Karakoram, the Himalayas, and the Hindu Kush. Okay, any questions or before we take a short break? So these water treaties, are what keep the peace, okay, between countries, and we don't want to pollute the water. We want to also make it plentiful. So from a strategic point of view, it's very important as well to have these type of treaties in place. There's a question here, comment here. So India was once a continent on its own. That is true. Aiden, you know, a lot of people consider India to still be a continent. It's called the Indian subcontinent. It includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Uh, it also includes, I believe, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. And for parts of its history, it was all united or almost all united under the Mughals and under the British. But most of the time, it's been split up in different kingdoms and empires. Okay, all right. I'm going to take a short break unless somebody has a question, and then we'll continue with the slide. See, I like to tie in some more interesting aspects of the conversation because now you guys have some basic knowledge. If there's no questions, let's see you in about 5 minutes or so. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so the Safe Water Drinking Act of 2002, it also it basically helps regulate anybody who supplies drinking water. So Ontario Clean Water Agency, who runs water treatment systems or drinking water systems, comes under this. Then you have the Clean Water Act, which was to protect source water protection areas and make sure that development plans keep this in mind. So let me try to explain that to you guys a little bit better. So let's say you have a drinking well. Let's say you've got a drinking well. Drinking well. This legislation was meant to protect, let's say this is the area that they're meant to protect. Why? Because the groundwater aquifer, I'll show that in green. The groundwater is being recharged through this area. So you're protecting the source of the groundwater. If you don't, and you have a spill of some sorts, you might be pulling this contamination into a drinking water supply. And that's why it's important to protect. And it's interesting when we're working on site assessments and we're drilling or doing remediation or looking at what standards to use, the municipalities won't let us use the less stringent standards unless we can prove that it's not going to be in violation of the Clean Water Act. Here's the Toxics Reduction Act. And it's basically the act that wants us to try to reduce the use of toxic substances. And Ontario Regulation 347 is for waste management. So under this, you've got the diversion, trying to reduce the amount of waste that's going to landfills. We're trying to encourage source separation. And this is the legislation under which they try to quantify or qualify hazardous wastes, industrial liquid waste, pathological wastes, radioactive wastes. This is the legislation that covers all of that. We're definitely going to cover waste in a lot more detail, especially if you're here in the third year. But this is the legislation, or one of the legislations that covers or governs it. Then you've got the Air Quality Regulation 419. It tells you what you can emit, how much you can emit, and actually before you get an approval to emit into the atmosphere, you have to also do air quality or air dispersion modeling as well, just to make sure that you're not causing or your activity is not going to impact or impinge somebody off site. So that air modeling, it might include Gaussian plume, which is a a model that predicts how the concentration of the contaminant is going to change depending on the wind speed, the temperature, the direction in which it's flowing, and the dispersion that's taking place in the atmosphere. Section 99 of the Act is responsible for the spills. In fact, I'm not sure if he's teaching you guys this semester, but one of our professors actually used to work in the Spills Action Center, and one of our alumni actually is one of the seniors now in the Spills Action Center. And, and when you have a spill, it's supposed to be reported immediately. And you are then now the responsible party to clean up the spill. And I want to share with you guys an interesting case. So years ago, and I'm probably going to bring up this case again at some point. But years ago, we got a call from Cottage Community. It was the start of the summer or summer season. This person owns a house which had a basement. And in that basement, with a different color, he had a above ground fuel oil tank in AST, which leaked. So right next to his house was the roadway. This was the roadway owned by the city of Kawartha Lakes. And then nearby was Sturgeon Lake. I don't know if I'm spelling that wrong, rightly. Like don't trust my spelling there. You got Sturgeon Lake. And unfortunately, the spill happened. It leaked through the subsurface and entered into the lake. And so they had to report it to the MECP Spills Action Center. They had to report it to the city. And I believe they had to report it to the Regional Conservation Authority. And the interesting thing that ended up happening that they were able to clean up their property all the way to the roadway. And the ministry was able to, with the Conservation Authority's help, and hiring people like ourselves to clean up this part. But underneath the roadway, that oil still existed. And so they were forced to pay for this cleanup because the insurance company's money ran out. And it went to court. As the ministry said, well, no, it's your problem. They don't care that if the landowner is no longer able to afford. And it is actually a famous decision that came down 2 years ago against the city of Kawartha Lakes. And I'm hoping that one of you guys uses this as one of your case studies. Uses this as one of your case studies. Okay. I thought it was interesting that and which regulation did the courts use to decide against them? It was one of them was Section 99. Now, if your land, which is the roadway owned by the city, is still continuing to act as a source of contamination, while you're on the hook to clean it up. You also have the renewable energy approval, which is required for all the projects that are under the renewable energy. Now you could file just an ESER, which is like an ECA, but a lot simpler. And I'm going to talk about that next. And it's a lot less complicated than an REA. So this is what an ESER is: environmental activity and sector registry. And so they're trying to make an ESER an easy system for people who have routine activities that do require an ECA, but are not as big a deal. So like, for example, heating systems, power systems, small solar plants, automotive refinishing. So yes, they're low risk, but they do have some emissions, and they do have some activities that typically would require an ECA, but not as complicated or risky. So yes, but in this case, it's just to make it easier, because if you ever work in the ECA field, you'll see how complicated it gets. So the last item that I'm going to mention to you guys is the record of site condition. It's under OREG 153/04. And it encourages groundwater standards and to get your site certified. And it puts the liability onto the private sector. Puts the onus on them. Now, typically under Regulation 153/04, when do you require an RSC? It's very clearly stated, according to the regulation. It's when you're, so under, the legislation is OREG, Ontario Regulation 153/04, typically written as OREG 153/04, and then they say, including its amendments. It was amended in 2011, came out in 2004. You need to file a record of site condition with the Ministry of the Environment. You need to file a record of site condition if you are changing the land use from a less sensitive to a more sensitive land use. So an example would be, let's say you want to convert a factory, a former factory, into a school. So a factory would be less sensitive, whereas a school would be more sensitive. And you would file an RSC, or record of site condition. Does an RSC look like? Hold one up for you guys. It's filed back in 2021. So I guess we were doing the work in 2020. I remember this project. This is the letter saying, yep, your RSC has been filed. It's from the Ministry of the Environment to Mr. Wise, owner of this property. It's in Mississauga. Okay. This is the actual RSC here. And it gives you the condition of the site right now, after it goes through the paperwork of the owner, where the site is, who was the qualified professional who filed it, what were the documents used to file it, what are the standards used. So in this case, it's table 3, non-potable, And these are the standards. Now, another thing that the reason why we needed to file the RC for them is it was an industrial area, commercial industrial area, and they wanted to uh, develop it into a daycare. And so industrial is very, very prone in theory to contaminating a site. And then when you have a daycare, you have vulnerable people, children who could be affected by that. So that's why we had to do a study at the site, a site assessment, and file the record of site condition. Another thing that happens, yes, it's usually only if it's changing the land use to less sensitive or more sensitive land use. But another thing that sometimes happens is cities won't give you construction permits unless you file a record of site condition or get an RSC. And I can tell you right now, in the private sector, environmental technician work, a lot of it is related to RSCs when it comes to land development. So let's go through a scenario as we end our lecture discussion today, where why is it important to understand OREG 153/04? So let's take a look. Let's say we have a property and it's an industrial site in Whitby. So it's in the industrial area of Whitby. Whitby. It also has sandy silt soil based on the study. It's provided water by the town, so municipal water. Municipal water. And the bedrock is around 30 meters. So the bedrock's 30 meters. So the first thing we look at is what is the type of use, land use? We say it's industrial commercial. So that's the first thing that the regulation will tell us. Then if a greater number of soil can pass through 75 microns filter, it's medium to fine grained soil. It is provided water by the city, so it's non-potable. Water condition non-potable, and it is not shallow soil. So what does that tell us? Why are we looking at a site according to the regulation so closely? Why would we care? The reason why we care is that will help us determine which sets of standards to apply. Because depending on all of these factors, you then assess which table you're going to use. Since it's non-potable and it's not shallow soil, meaning there's not shallow bedrock, and we're not close to a water body, we're going to pick table number 3. In addition to that, table number 3, we are going to pick the standards. Table number 3, industrial commercial. Let's go to table number 3. Let's see, where are we now? Oh, that's table number 4. So we're table number 3 right here. So this is the table that we would pick. And we would pick industrial. And you see the brackets? Why would we use the standard that's outside of the bracket? It's because within the bracket, it's referring to soil that is coarse or sorry, medium fine. If it's medium fine soil, the standard can be a little bit higher. Why? Because it's harder for the contamination to spread. Okay, so these are a few important items for you to remember. 153 is probably 04. 15304 is probably, if you get into the environmental sector, it's one of the most common legislation that you should know. Okay. All right. That is all for today in terms of the lecture. But what I'd like to do is now share with you your assignment for this week. Well, there's the term project and then your assignment for this week. So I believe I posted your term project. So we're probably going to have 4 groups, maybe 5, depending on how you guys do this. And you're going to prepare a presentation. So 2 groups will go in week 12 and 2 groups will go in week 13. And this is the outline. You have to deliver a presentation and deliver a written report as well. And the report and your presentation should have these items: the law that was or act that is applied, the issue at question, where the opposing parties, the arguments from both sides, the decision, or where the case stands at present. If the decision has not been made, where is it? Right. In terms of the presentation, here are the 3 aspects that I'm looking for in terms of getting good mark. And I'll talk about it. Since it's an online presentation, we'll talk about how best to proceed with that. Okay. And then you've got a written portion that is a report. And we will have to go over these items in the coming weeks. This week, what you need to do is so this week's assignment is, and the group window stays open. This week's assignment is to create a group with your classmates. And then post the names. So if one person posts the names, I'll mark it for all 4. But if you're not sure if your groupmate posted it, you're welcome to post it again. I don't mind. So the online assignment for this week, that's all I'm having for. Create your group of up to 4 persons for the term project. Your deliverable for this week is the names of your 4 group members. If you only have 3, that's all right. If you only want to do it with 2, that's all right as well. But no more than 4. And like I said, this window is still open. There's 16 people here, but that includes me. So there's 15 people here. If you have somebody in mind in the group, please go ahead and reach out to them and start the process. Okay. Otherwise, so the lecture part is done today, but you do have to work on getting your group together, and the due date is this weekend. So it's important to get a start on that right now. Now I'm going to stop the recording now so that I can post this for you guys to review later.